My name is Denis-Smith, and I'm delighted to welcome you for another Next 100 Years event. We tonight will have a couple of film premieres, and a really special guest will join us to discuss her life and work. But before we do so, I'd like to invite to the stage, to the virtual stage, one of our greatest champions in our work for achieving equality in the legal profession. That is Alison Eddy. And Alison is the managing partner for the London office of Irwin Mitchell. The firm supported the Next 100 Years video series that you will be seeing. Some of the films are part of it, and also has been a great supporter of the first 100 Years project over the years since we started it in 2015. Alison also is the head of the medical negligence practice at Irwin Mitchell, and her work is varied. It includes expertise in neurotrauma around children and adults, and those that have suffered brain injury and other severe injuries. And she's also one of the Champion of the Year award winners at the Inspirational Women in Law Awards that we host every year. Keep an eye out for the 2022 invitations to nominate your leading woman in the firms coming up in a couple of weeks. And also, Alison really is very well known for making work and life come together in balance, and being a champion of a healthy work culture, and really being ahead of the game in the legal profession for championing new ways of working at a time many weren't championing such things. Alison, welcome to the virtual stage, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Dana. I'm really happy that Irwin Mitchell are supporting the Next 100 Years video series. What I love about the 100 Years project, first 100 years, next 100 years, is just how joyful and celebratory it is. And it's so important that we shine a spotlight on rising women leaders in law, particularly those who are currently underrepresented. So the videos mean that we can hear in their own words how our emerging leaders got to where they are and what lessons they can share with us. And that will really help young aspiring lawyers to dream big, and that's what it's all about, really. So Ariel, White-Tsimikalis, we're going to be featuring your film this evening. Ariel trained at Freshfields. She then worked in a number of top law firms in corporate finance roles. You're now a partner at the US firm Goodwin Procter in their tech and life sciences group and their capital markets practice. So also, as one of only a handful of Black female partners, you've also been really active in D&I space within your own business and externally as part of your ESG practice. You've also worked with the Law Society and act as a mentor with the Black Solicitors Network. And so I'm really looking forward to watching your film now. So let's have a look together.
Everything happens in phases, and don't make big career decisions based on a difficult phase. For the most part of my career, I've been so focused on the how to get to the next step, what I need to do to get to A from A to B, what are others doing that who have been successful, how can I do it better? And I never asked myself the why, or never focused on that. And when I went back to really kind of ask myself, okay, well, what is it that gets me up? What am I passionate about? What's different about me? How can I differentiate myself? And for me, it was really realizing that intersectionality was such a key thing about me. And I had spent most of my career kind of dialing down what was different about me because I was so desperate to be successful that I felt I had to sort of mold into what that success looked like when I looked around me. And it was only when I realized that actually what is different about me is my superpower. My intersectionality was not my handicap, it was my superpower. One of the photos is 4 generations, so it's my great grandmother on my maternal side, my Greek side, and one of the other pictures is with my African American father, passed away when I was 10 years old very suddenly. And I think for me, those pictures, whilst not necessarily directly career related, are so important to my career and how I've managed to stay in it and be here today. One of my key drivers is to have impact, but to also honor the efforts of those who came before me. There will be times where you will really struggle with your decision to have come back from maternity leave or stay up all night or log back on after you've put the baby down. And it's difficult. It's really hard. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it in any way. I had postnatal depression. I really struggled kind of readjusting to life as a mother and a capital markets lawyer as well. And I struggled to lose my baby fat. And I remember in the first couple of weeks coming back to work after my leave, people would get up for me on the tube thinking I was still pregnant, and I was like, no, I'm not pregnant anymore. I just look at and just didn't feel myself at all in any respect. But what I also do say is everything happens in phases, and don't make big career decisions based on a difficult phase. So kind of try to ride things out, find a way to sort of surf the wave if you can, and just know that when you get to the other side, it'll be in a different phase. It may not be that all the challenges are gone, but there'll be different ones, and you'll have along the way build this resilience to be able to adapt. I know people don't go to these ceremonies anymore, but I was I don't know, really geeky and went and took the day off from work because I was still training at the time. And that piece of paper and that moment was the culmination of 8 years of studying and training before I could even call myself a lawyer. So it was a real proud moment for me. I really encourage you to go because it's a very emotive, I think, moment, and it's good to celebrate things. So within my business, I'm very focused on change, particularly around governance and this increased focus on good governance and bringing the E and the S into G. And public companies are very much at the forefront of being required to think about climate change in a more serious way. And increasingly now there's a consultation with the regulator about actually bringing diversity targets into the listing rules for public companies. So really having to think about the makeup of their boards. It really sort of resonates with me because better run companies are better for society. So I actually really enjoy that being part of my practice and helping my clients really see things and approach governance in sort of that way. I think as an industry, we don't change very easily. We're quite Paleolithic, I think, when it comes to embracing change and pivoting. Although I think with the pandemic, that had to really be accelerated and come into focus. And I think particularly since the acceleration under the Black Lives Matter movement, the question of diversity is really, I think, or the conversation around diversity has really changed. The profession is trying to change, is trying to find its new self. But we need to do more, I think, as a profession to attract really talented young people who are seeing other sectors or other professions as more attractive.
Thank you. That was lovely. I love the fact that that you came to see your intersectionality as a superpower, having dialed it down. So how did you manage to find strength in the things that make you different, that made you different?
I guess because I was forced to, in a way. And I should start off by sort of thanking Next 100 Years for having me here. And I apologize in advance for the croakiness of my voice. I have COVID, but we'll power through as per usual. But really, it was adversity, I think, and also just, you know, having to think about, well, how am I going to cut through this and you know, create a career and a future for myself. And it was only when things get difficult, I think, or when you come between a rock and a hard place, is when you really start to get creative and think outside the box. And I really only had a sort of come to Jesus moment about my career kind of late in the day, I would say. I was over 10 years qualified. And, you know, Brexit was looming on the horizon. And I was thinking, you know, capital markets were shut. And I was just thinking, okay, I'm quite a senior lawyer now. You know, what do I do, and how do I? There's no one who looks like me in this field, you know, on the equity side. And, you know, how do I cut through it? How do I make a name for myself, or how do I come at it in a different way? And that was when I realized, actually, okay, well, let's go back to basics. And you know, what is it that what do I bring to the table that's different? How can I differentiate myself? And that's when I realized, well, actually, it's one of the key things about me is that I'm different, and being so different means I can go to most meetings, or you could put me in a dinner party, anyone. I'm the person you want to bring to a dinner party, because I'll find a way to connect with someone in some way. It'll be from having lived in Norway and speaking Norwegian, crazily enough, you know, or being half Greek and half African American, or, you know, something about, you know, having to pay my way from, you know, through law schools, or working at the Gap on Princess Street in Edinburgh, you know, that will give me a way of connecting with someone else. And consequently, after 15 years of building relationships, I've got some pretty incredible relationships, and that has really started to pay dividend in terms of building a practice and having a client following. So I realized that actually I couldn't do that if that wasn't because of who I am, and if I didn't bring all of that to me in every instance, then I wouldn't have been able to build my practice in the way that I have.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, the fact that your difference is, you know, you recognize that's what makes you so special and makes you stand out is, you know, is wonderful. How were you able to rise? I mean, you're a senior, you know, in a very senior position in, you know, in an American law firm, where it's not easy to rise to senior positions. But, you know, given that you're, given that women and, again, you know, people of colour are underrepresented in the legal profession, what were the major contributors to your success?
I think first and foremost, and to borrow a term that's used a lot, is, you know, honour the contract, you know, and just be good at what you do, and just consistently do that. You know, I've certainly made mistakes, and there's certainly been times where I haven't been, you know, as impactful or as strong as I wanted on a call or in a meeting. You go away, you think about it, and you come back stronger, and you never make the same mistake twice. I think really then beyond that is I would say there's sort of two key things that have really kind of contributed to my longevity in the profession. And that is, I think, firstly, sheer determination. I'm very stubborn. I always try to get my way. And I actually never wanted to leave the profession on anything but my own terms. And I never wanted to leave because I found it difficult, or because I was pregnant, because I was a mum, or, you know, I never wanted those to be the reasons why I gave up on a dream I've had since I was to be a part of the and instead, you know, I just, you know, I took actions towards opening new doors. I changed firms. I looked for avenues for myself to open up new opportunities, to sort of try to have a crack at it from like a slightly different angle if what I felt, you know, where I was if I was hitting a bit of a brick wall. In my practice, I honed my skills. I faced my weaknesses and improved on those. I put myself out there, and I lent into opportunities. I got comfortable being uncomfortable. Still struggle with that. Really kind of keep pushing and pushing to grow that sort of my comfort zone. And embrace new areas of practice. I asked myself things like I spoke about before in terms of, okay, what's different about me? I to be strategic, playing to my strengths. I was meant to be in South Africa this week, actually, trying to build an Africa angle to my practice, to sort of say, well, I'm an African American, I've got this angle to I want to build this into my practice. Sadly didn't manage to get on the plane for that. But I think the sheer determination truly comes, I think a lot of it from one of the pictures I showed of my father and of my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And I'm a descendant of an African slave and a Greek immigrant who went to the US. His family went to the US to flee a dictatorship in Greece and to pursue the American dream. So I think that makes for quite a combination of work ethic and determination. So I think that's one. And I think secondly, I never kind of try to miss the opportunity to highlight this, because really the second, I think, is just my clients, truly my clients, a lot of whom are females in very senior positions. And they really showed up for me. They spoke for me when I wasn't in the room. They called partners to tell them, I should have been at a training presentation, or I should have been brought to a dinner, or I should have been included in the pitch because they know I work there. Or they send me work, they accept my calls, they set up meetings, they allow me to introduce new partners, my new firm and all that kind of stuff. So, for those who maybe not are in law firms but are in-house and users of external legal service providers, I always say that you've got such immense power to have impact and help bring up a new generation of more diverse lawyers in our profession, and for that, and to my clients, who particularly investment banks, have been extremely supportive in my rise to my position.
I imagine, you talk in the film about your resilience, and I imagine, in the area of law where you're practicing, because I work in a very female-dominated area of law, but it must be very male-dominated, the area that you're working in. So I imagine you do need to build quite a lot of resilience, and so having the sort of support you've just been talking about must mean everything, really. Can I ask you about work-life balance, whether as a partner in an American law firm known for their long hours culture, how you've managed to achieve a work-life balance, working, because you're a mum as well, as you talked about in the film. And so I'd be interested in knowing how you've managed to achieve that balance. And also, if you think there's more we could be doing for women women on maternity leave, women coming back from maternity leave, because I think it's a tough time in a woman's life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will say, I am at a US law firm, but I don't work harder than I did when I was at a UK one. So I just have to say that. But in terms of work-life balance, do I have one? No. But then again, I think if you're looking for balance, then I think all you'll ever find is disappointment. I think balance assumes equilibrium, and I think to be, in my field, corporate finance and capital markets, there will be times where work will take over a little bit more than your personal or family life, and then there are other times where, like yesterday, I just said, guys, I'm out. I really don't feel well. You're going to have to deal with it, and I'll speak to you tomorrow, and hopefully I'm able to speak to you, things like that. So I think what I try to seek instead is what I call a bit of a blend, and ensuring that blend is sustainable. So I truly love what I do, and I think doing something that you love is is the core here, right? And I know, I think we'll come on to talk about, you know, purpose and all of that. And I just think once you find that and you're connected to what you do, it becomes easier to have this blend. And so my work comes with me wherever I go, and I'm actually okay with that. It doesn't mean I'm a workaholic or I don't know how to separate my home life from my work life. It just means that actually a lot of what I do is work, but it's fun. You know, I can go to my 5-year-old's birthday parties with friends, and I'm in business development mode. You know, I might meet, you know, another female who's, you know, a potential client, or we have, you know, I could help her, for example, and, you know, we're exchanging numbers and things like that. I love it. It just makes the 5-year-old parties more fun, if I'm honest. But it becomes play and it becomes fun and it just becomes easy. So I think that's why I talk about it in terms of a blend, because sometimes it just, that separation, if you're looking for that complete separation, I think that's very difficult to achieve. But instead, if you're doing something that you love, you know, it feels like fun, and equally I bring that fun to work in terms of, you know, not just the work I do and loving what I do, but everything around it, you know, being involved in firm initiatives, or building teams and mentoring and spending time with the younger generation, just to tell them all the mistakes I made so that somebody can, you know, have accelerated progress, you know, compared to my own. So I think, yeah, that is probably how I try to look at it. And I think what's different now, but with the maturity I have, sort of being in the profession for over 15 years now, is I'm more clear on my non-negotiables. So kind of going back to your point around resilience, I'm, you know, I am more in, like, I now know what self-care means. I didn't really know about that as a concept. Probably until, you know, I really needed to definitely know, but I do now, and I think I'm much more aware of things that I need. I realized that particularly with motherhood, I was very independent, so I really missed time on my own, and now I realize that that's just something I need to carve into my day somehow, or you know. And I'll do like a, you know, once every 6 months, I'll go to like going to wellness retreats, for example, and I will go and I'll just go by myself for a week, and I'll spend a week at a wellness retreat. I'll try to try different ones around Europe and stuff. So I just know that that's just something that I need, and if I feel that I have that, then the blend feels, you know, like a coffee. It tastes nice, you know, I'm happy with it. And with my son, you know, I guess, and the blend is different for everybody. You know, different people are going to, again, I don't like the equilibrium insinuation that you get from a balance, because that is different for all of us. So I don't like putting my son to bed very much, because he wasn't a good sleeper, and sometimes it would take me 2 to 3 hours, or I'd have to throw him in the buggy and walk around my neighborhood for a long time. It wasn't quality time for him or me. So I've really kind of shifted my quality time with him to the morning. I love getting him dressed. I love, you know, making his little bottle of milk, and, you know, we, you know, catch up on some homework, and, you know, have breakfast together. And so I, you know, and I feel if I miss that, so I don't really like having morning calls, for example, you know, just because I really try to preserve that time. And so you just find, you know, different ways of how you want to draw a line in the sand and what's your non-negotiable, so that you can make time for the things that are important to you. And it does get easier, I think, to do that as you get more senior, because actually you have a bit more control over your own diary. And I do take all full liberties when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about self-care, and some of us are not very good at actually practicing it, but it sounds as if, you know, you've sort of nailed that one, I think, which is great.
I've got COVID now, I'm not sure.
Apart from the fact you've got COVID, so thank you very much for not exercising too much self-care tonight, so that you know, we have the pleasure of chatting to you and you know, watching a wonderful film with you. I've just got one last question, which is, what do you wish you'd known before you undertook this career path?
I think it's what I kind of talked about a little bit in my film. The real inflection point, I think, was when I really asked myself the question why. I think because, and I think this comes with a weight, I think, that ethnic minorities carry, perhaps a lot unknowingly. Sometimes you just feel so lucky to be where you are because you know few who look like you have been there, or others have tried and failed, or and often in my case died. So I guess I never really gave myself the privilege, I think, or the luxury of asking myself, okay, well, what do you really want to do? Or how do you really want to shape your career? What's your ideal work? What makes you tick? And I think I just had to think, well, I had to be the best. I had to go to the best, I had to go to the best firm, you know, because that's going to make my parents happy. That's going to honor those who came before me. I've got to do it for them, you know. And I think I didn't ask myself that question or understand truly the importance of why before, because once you're sort of more connected with what drives you, or why you get up in the morning, and what makes you excited, or attuned to maybe what you're not excited about, and how you can change that. And I think you can be more intentional about your career, and I think it really helps you stay in the profession more sustainably and for a longer period of time, because you feel you've got purpose, you're connected to what you're doing, you're excited about what you're doing, you will reach for your own potential, you'll maximize your potential, because you're on a path of that just accelerates, because you are so connected with what you want to do and what you want to achieve. And so I think if I had understood the importance of the why over the what earlier in my career, then maybe I think I would have been a lot more intentional about some of the choices I made, and I probably would have enjoyed the journey a little bit more than been so focused on the end result. And I think once you can celebrate and enjoy the journey rather than being so focused and on one particular outcome, which may not turn out to be exactly how you envisaged or set out for it to be, just makes it the whole process a bit more sustainable. But having said that, I don't have any regrets, because everything that has happened up until now, and every time I've stumbled and fallen, is the reason I'm standing right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and inspiring. And thank you for turning up when you're clearly not feeling at your absolute best. Right, so I'm going to head back to Dana.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoy that. This is absolutely what the next 100 years is all about. Fantastic conversations. And also, we're always passionate about conversations between the different sides of the legal profession. We're very keen to bring the barristers, the solicitors, the whole ecosystem around the same table, so to speak. So we have another film for you before we will have a panel conversation at the very end to wrap up the evening. And that is the film of Abimbola Johnson. She is a barrister at 25 Bedford Row. She specializes in serious crime, professional discipline, and inquiry work. She's also passionate about addressing the low level of confidence between Black and ethnic minority groups and the police. And last year, she was asked by the National Police Chief to chair a new independent scrutiny and oversight board to help address this in England and Wales. So I'm delighted to introduce to you a film that we made about Abimbola Johnson, her life and work.
Oh, I love this question. I love this question. Okay. Cool. So I think that the best thing that this generation can do, coming through and wanting to come to the bar, is just to be themselves. I'd walk into a courtroom and I would be the only other Black face in the courtroom. My name is Abimbola Johnson. I'm a criminal defence and professional regulatory barrister, and I practice from 25 Bedford Row. So basically, if you get into trouble with the law, or if you're a professional and you get into trouble with the body that kind of regulates the standards for your career, I'm the person to call up and hopefully get you out of a bind. One of the roles that I have is I chair an independent scrutiny board. Effectively, the role that I have there is to scrutinise all of the 43 police forces across England and Wales in relation to their implementation of an action plan that they're coming up with to make the police force, to use their own words, to make the service an anti-racist police service. So the idea is that they are going to eliminate or do their best to reduce racial disparities in terms of not only how they treat their own police officers, so black police officers, but also how they treat members of the public when they come into contact with them, whether that's as suspects, as witnesses, as potential victims. There's a lot of racial disparity that we see in the criminal justice system. And frankly, black people tend to be at the brunt end of the majority of the measures that you look at. It was the death of George Floyd, and I know that was an American case, but for me, so that was June 2020. And for me, I heard over the last few years leading up to that, there had always been these news announcements of black boys, black men, black women and girls being killed by the police, predominantly in American cases. But of course, as a black barrister practicing in England and Wales, those stories or those experiences are reinforced very often, and they're reflected in some elements of your own criminal practice. So what's happening was, I was hearing these stories about things which were happening stateside. I'd walk into a courtroom and I would be the only other black face in the courtroom. That really started to kind of get to me psychologically in a way that I don't think I had really kind of like taken the time or given myself the space to process until the first wave of the Black Lives Matter protests, and then the second wave, which obviously were sparked by the murder of George Floyd. And what I started to think about was the fact that as a barrister in this system, which is a very white dominated decision-making system that affects a lot of black people, I felt that I was a barrister who was unable really to change the system that I was working within. And I sort of started to feel like a cog in the wheel, that I was just part of this process that continues to create these racial disparities, or contribute towards these racial disparities, or at the very least replicate the racial disparities that we see in wider society. It certainly wasn't doing enough to reduce those experiences. So I've always done things like diversity and inclusion, equality kind of work alongside being a barrister, but that isn't enough. That's not enough to actually be kind of pushing forward towards anti-racism. So the first thing that I did was starting to have really open conversations with my colleagues in chambers. Beyond that, I wrote this challenge that I put on social media about like trying to be more anti-racist in day-to-day. That led to me writing an article in Elle magazine about my experiences as a black lawyer, and again just reopening those conversations and letting people see the kind of things that I experience, the things that I witness and so on in the courtroom. And since then it's just kind of sort of expanded in terms of the remit of what I've been doing, and I'm really happy about it actually. I've been able to be on an advisory board for the Howard League for Penal Reform, where we've come up with a lawyer's guide to being anti-racist in the courtroom. So how to go beyond just representing your client and actually like pushing forward pushing against the racial disparities, coming up with creative solutions, being culturally competent in the way that you interact with your clients. All of that was started by me just deciding to bring that into work and no longer just have those discussions in private with my Black family members and my Black friends and so on. I just thought, actually, what I need to be doing is, when I have the kind of strength to, is to open up those conversations and have them with my friends from different backgrounds, or with the decision makers from different backgrounds, to try and get their ear and try to push these things forward. It's meant that I now have a career that I think better reflects the values and better reflects the aims that I have towards like actual institutional and systemic change around these matters. I think that something that people need to bear in mind is that the legal profession needs to be reflective of the society that we serve. Traditionally, the legal profession is very pale male and stale. What we're seeing now is this movement towards a truly more inclusive profession. It's not happening fast enough. We're not getting it right in many ways, but there's definitely that movement towards it, at least in some factors. And I think that what is going to be really interesting in the next few decades is the people who are going to be the gatekeepers, the ones who are going to be making those decisions around recruitment, who have influence over retention and promotion in the profession, are, you know, this precocious millennial generation that I belong to, and we're being followed up by this even more precocious, even more radical, even more forward-thinking generation. There is a challenge that they are setting for us to be more open and to be more accepting. And I think that what they are doing is that they are challenging the concept of professionalism. They are demonstrating to us that it's not about what your hair looks like. It's not about conforming to a particular way of presentation. It's not about even, you know, getting everything absolutely perfect in terms of the eloquence of your submissions. It's about the substance of what you're saying. It's about the insight that you can bring into areas of society that are often overlooked and ignored. It's about the fact that it enriches the profession for us to have a broad spectrum of contribution. The best thing that this generation can do, coming through and wanting to come to the bar, is just to be themselves, to show that being yourself is not something you need to compromise on, that you can still be excellent and be yourself. And that we're the ones that need to change, we're the ones that need to be more accommodating, we're the ones that need to be more open-minded, because ultimately we're the ones who are going to benefit from that.
What a fantastic film. I really enjoyed that one as well. So we will have a little conversation between Ariel, Alison, if you could just rejoin, please. And also we'll be joined by Gurpreet Lalli, who is a senior associate at Irwin Mitchell in the medical negligence team in Cambridge. And also she's a leading voice in diversity, both in the firm and externally. So welcome to all of you, and welcome back to some of you. And I just wanted to start, obviously, incorporating some of the things we've heard, but also I wanted to start with Alison, actually, around what do you think has driven your success in your career? Because obviously you were one of the early women leaders in the legal profession when very few were around, in fact, none whatsoever. So what do you think was the one thing that made you go further than other women?
Gosh, God, I don't think I can put that into one sentence. I think I'm somebody who is anyone watching who knows me will agree with this. I tend to do things to excess, and I think it was really important to me to have a successful career and to have a career where I was making a difference. That's why I'm in the area of law that I am, I really wanted to be able to make a difference. And at the same time, I wanted to be able to have a family. When I say do things to excess, I got married at university. I've got 5 children that I had in quick succession. And I wanted to be able to, I really thought, I'm from that generation, I think, where I really thought we could have it all. And of course, in a way I have. I've got a job that I've absolutely loved. And I've got a great family, but you can have it all some of the time. You can't have it all the time, and all of you with children will know it. It entails a hell of a lot of juggling. So I think for me, it's just about that drive to be the best that I can. I've always just wanted to be, to be the best that I can, and I don't say no for an answer. I always want to try and make things work. So I think I think it's my personality really that's been the key driver.
And going back now to the films and the stories we've heard, and including yours actually, and hopefully how it reflects in the firm, because I hope that you have been a role model. In fact, I know, Alison, you have been, for people coming behind you, trying to rise up. And our project has always been about imagery, really, and trying to create a visual representation of the legal profession, really much more diverse, because women are more diverse than the men that Abimbola mentioned, being white, pale, and male, I think was the expression, or a combination of those 3 words. So I just wanted to ask about how important it is, visual representation, in your own careers and personal development. Did you find that was something that could advance you by seeing people like you or people ahead of you joining the legal profession and succeeding? And how important is it to have that visual representation among us? Any one of you can start. Shall we start with you, Gurpreet? Because we were talking about role models internally, so hopefully there's something you can share with us.
Yes, so firstly, thank you for inviting me, and it's really inspiring to see these videos. Role modelling is really important. I think it inspires you because when you join an organisation, you visualise yourself where you could end up. So for me, I came in really junior, female, from an ethnic minority background, and I wanted to see where I could place myself. So you look at people with the same background, so you think, well, actually, if someone has a similar background, I could achieve those heights. And as a female, you look at, well, where do females progress? So Alison was doing so much for us. I mentioned really breaking down those barriers, and actually our representation is so great when it comes to female representation. So from a visual point of view, and actually even from an ethnic minority point of view, looking at where Ariel's got to, it's really inspiring, because actually then you can aim that high and you can see that it's possible for you as well.
And what about you, Alison and Ariel? Obviously quite different paths. Did you feel, or do you think, obviously to some degree, Alison, because you're supporting us and our kind of multimedia format in the project, obviously you do agree that visual representation is critical, but what do you find, and what did you find as you were coming through the career that you've had?
I mean, I think that role models are crucial, actually. I think it's so important that that you see people who look like you in senior roles. And of course, that's changed hugely. I'm not pretending that, we haven't got a long way to go, but we've come a long way. When I joined the profession, not only were there hardly any female leaders, there weren't very many female solicitors, actually. So we have come a long way. And, in Irwin Mitchell now, over 50% of our partners are women. And in our London office, 20%, I think, of our partners are minority ethnic, which is not great. I know it could be better than that, but actually, but we're all making progress. But I think, role models like Abimbola and Ariel are so important, and having those women in senior positions so that people can see that, that you can get to the top. I think it's critical.
And coming to you, Ariel, how does it feel to be a role model? And when did you first realize that you were becoming something that maybe you didn't have as you were coming up?
Because I still feel I am so, I'm aiming here. I'm not even where I want to be yet. So, it's still hard for me to believe I'm someone's role model, but I think what I've always wanted was to be to others what I maybe felt I would have loved to have, and not just sort of be a role model in terms of someone who's got a similar skin color, but be a role model in the way I show up at work, in the way I manage and lead a team, in the way I'm building a practice, in the way I am a mother, a working mother, and just role model all those different facets of me, so that others who want to have kids, or others who want to harness their backgrounds in some way and bring them into their practice, or others who have different interests as well, can find a way to do that and stay in our profession, because I think that's what I'm most committed to, is making sure that, particularly now where we're really in this war on talent, and all firms I think are feeling this, and are post-COVID and the pandemic and everything, not that it was post, but post the lockdown version, but part of COVID. We need to make sure that our profession is attractive to the younger generation, and in order to keep and attract the talent, we've got to recruit from the biggest pool of talent possible, and you can't do that if you ignore people who might have come from a slightly different background to how maybe we've traditionally thought about it in our profession.
That's great. And I wanted to ask as well, do you think that we as a profession, and law firms individually, and actually every single, chambers as well, are doing enough to create this kind of stronger visual representation of a more diverse legal profession? I think at least at the junior end, and where we kind of capture the moment in time with the project, the picture, especially for women in law, is much more diverse. Are we doing enough as firms, as individuals, to make sure that picture is different in the way we are perceived in society? I would love to go first. Alison? You are on mute. It's the line that has to appear on every virtual. Absolutely, it has to be. It's part of the authenticity of virtual events.
I think what's changed is we all want to be better. We all want to learn. I think we want to be challenged. And I think as businesses, we're very alive now to the problems. It was interesting for me actually. Ariel and Abimbola both spoke about Black Lives Matter, and that being a pivotal moment. And I think it was for us as well, and actually Gurpreet might want to say more about this, but it was a catalyst for us to start having let's talk about race sessions in the business, really to raise awareness at all levels and to get engagement throughout the business, right up to board level. And what are the issues, and let's have an honest discussion. And we need to bring more people in at junior level. We need to recruit more Black, minority, ethnic colleagues into the business. We need to retain more. We need to promote more. And so I think the fact that everybody recognises there is a problem, is able to have an honest discussion, means that we've come a long way, and we know there needs to be more visibility.
And because you mentioned Gurpreet, I just wanted to come to you to tell us what you see from your angle and your position in the firm.
So it's definitely changed. So in the last 2 years, and I think a lot of firms will say the Black Lives Matter movement really kickstart their diversity programs, because before it was something that we talked about and it's sort of shelved. But it's more openly spoken about, and firms have agendas with objectives which are measurable and should be measurable, and going further, they should be holding themselves accountable as well. But for us, the first thing we did was we had Let's Talk About Race sessions, and everybody across the firm was invited to speak about race in a very safe environment. So it didn't matter if you were from an ethnic minority or not. And there's so much learning that came from that, which then has fed into our agenda in terms of we need to work on allyship, because actually, in order to be good allies and have better allies, both of us need to say what we want from that and what we want from our allies. So I think we're all heading in the right direction. But as with obviously Ariel mentioned, it takes so long to qualify to be a lawyer. progress is slow only because to bring people in and progress them up the chain, it's going to take time. But what I can say and what I can see is what the profession looks like today is not what it will look like in the next 5 to 10 years, because we are making progress, and what we're doing now will come to fruition in the future, not in the distant future, but in the short-term future.
Ariel?
Yeah, just slightly, I totally agree with Gurpreet and Alison's points. I guess the 2 additional ones I'd mention are, and look, let's celebrate the fact that up to almost 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, the 3 of us couldn't even apply to be as practitioners, let alone me, forget it, non-British and ethnic minority as well. But so that has to be celebrated, and the fact that we've got more women coming out of law school, that our profession is actually pretty evenly split in terms of practitioners, if not more female practitioners than male. So our problem has stopped becoming a barrier to entry point, which is what we had to celebrate. We celebrated in '98 with the Sex Disqualification Act, but it's a progression issue now. So we lose our women from private practice, at least at the senior associate stage, and there's just a real drop off. And so it's now making sure that we take advantage of this pipeline that we've managed to fill on the gender side, and seeing that up to partnership. And also within our partnerships, that I'm particularly focused on the split between equity and non-equity for firms that have that split. And one other aspect that I'm particularly focused on, and where I do think over the next 100 years, I certainly will be throwing my efforts and energy into, and hoping that more focus will go into, is that ethnically diverse or ethnic minority female. So I think the Law Society, Race for Change, put out some interesting statistics last year. Black females leave the profession. 50% of Black females leave the profession within 3 years of qualification. That's really early. Our pipeline is dying off really, really early. And I think unless we broaden the conversation and look at diversity in our own diversity, inclusion and equity policies and initiatives and conversations internally within our organizations, unless we look at all of those through the lens of intersectionality to understand the compounded challenges intersectional individuals face, then we will continue to see that pipeline struggle to be built in the same way that the broader female pipeline has been built. And I'd love to see the gender diversity agenda to remain inclusive in and of itself, and it's not just the white women benefiting from that conversation, that it's also ethnically diverse women as well.
And I think we're coming towards the end, and we'd like to keep good time here at the next 100 years. So I loved when Abimbola mentioned, about being yourself, a bit of a superpower in her case as well. So I was wondering if I could go around the screen a little bit and talk about, you can name the kind of role models that you had that allowed you, that you see having this kind of being themselves authenticity as leaders. Not something that has been that common in the legal profession. Definitely when I was in practice, it wasn't something that I could say I was surrounded by in the city. So how do we cultivate this? This is really a strong way for women to be themselves. I think it really is playing into their strengths. Do you have role models that you can look up, or look, not necessarily up, sometimes role models are not up, that you feel are empowering you to stand by this new way of being a leader? Any one of you can unmute and lead the way.
Should I start? I'm muted. So I'm still fairly early on in my career, but I would say I work with phenomenal leaders at Owen Mitchell who I learn from all the time, and they give me the opportunity to actually be who I am. So I am from an ethnic minority, and I'm a female, but I also have so much to offer to a business from various angles. So I say I'm junior because both Ariel and Alison are partners, but I've had they give them the opportunity to sit on our D&I board. But what I would say is, for people that are coming up, is whether you see those opportunities and where you want those opportunities, don't be afraid to ask, put yourself, I mean, the worst people can say is no, but put yourself in the position of asking that you want to be in those positions, or you want those opportunities, and they will come. And that's how we'll be able to drive change.
Which one, Alison or Ariel, which one would prefer to come next?
I'm happy to go next. I mean, I would say that for me, it's definitely my younger colleagues, millennials and Gen Z, because I think they're fantastic role models. I think they're very forthright in their views. They're very challenging. You know, even before, well, we have a flexible by choice framework at Owen Mitchell, so people can, we're not mandated to come into the office, although you can see I'm in the office today. But even before the pandemic, we had a flexible working policy that was largely driven by younger colleagues, you know, wanting to work in a certain way. And I think they're fantastic, and they challenge us all the time, and they role model having a much better work-life balance than I ever managed to achieve.
And Ariel?
It's a tricky one, actually, because I think one of the things I've struggled with is having a role model on my way up, which is 100% why I'm here, in spite of COVID, because, you know, and why I want to use my platform to try to be out there, so someone who maybe looks like me can see someone who looks like them. I think we're only about 18 Black female partners at, you know, the UK's top firms. I'm not aware of another Black partner, equity capital markets partner in our country, male or female. So it's been really difficult, I think, for me to kind of look up and find someone along the way. So I've drawn, you know, bits from different role models I have in my life. I think my mom, first and foremost, who's always been unapologetic for being herself, which I've learned from immensely and has stood me in good stead. And I think some of the investment banks I've been in-house at, two of the teams I sat in were run by some really incredible women as GCs. One of whom I remember put an RFP back to a law firm and said, once you find a female to include, you know, one of your female lawyers in your firm, which I'm sure you have, you know, come back and try again, which I just thought was incredibly gutsy, and I'll never forget that. So I love that sort of gutsiness in the investment banking world. That's where I draw a lot of my inspiration. And then just my mum, I think, just always never being apologetic about our humble backgrounds. You know, she came from a very poor background, and always remembering that, even at times when things have changed.
Oh, well, I disappeared, but by magic I reappeared, thanks to BT broadband. Thank you, really, it's been amazing. Such a privilege to hear you speak, to hear you share your stories, and it's always so wonderful for me to have this amazing opportunity to sit around this table with women like you. It makes me feel so inspired and so energized and so happy about the future of the legal profession. I think it's in very, very good hands. Thank you, Owen Mitchell and Alison and the team, for supporting our project so constantly, and it's much appreciated. Nothing gets done, however magical power I might have. We can't create things without all of you being supportive. So thank you, Ariel, as well, for taking part in the filming, and to the first and next 100 Years teams for working behind the scenes to make it happen. The video will be shared publicly. We will have further screenings or more inspirational stories throughout this centenary year. It marks 100 years of women qualifying in England and Wales. And so we will celebrate and keep celebrating and having parties and remember how far we've come. And also remember to lay the foundation for the future, so we have a more equal profession for everybody to thrive. And on that note, thank you again. See you very soon. Stay connected, and thank you to each and every one of you. See you later.
Thank you.